We'll get this webinar underway. Thank you everyone for joining me here today on how to accelerate IT service delivery with remote support. My name is Brett Moffat. I'm a solutions architect here for Cireson in the Asia Pacific region. Now I'm just having a look at who's on this call. I think I've met pretty much everyone that's on this call. I know there's a couple of people I haven't met. But you're all customers of Cireson, which is awesome. It's fantastic. Now, I hope that you've are aware that you probably already own the remote support tools. So what we're going to have a look at today is how they can be used and the best way that they can integrate with what it is that you're doing and really help you deliver that IT service delivery that you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, we'll get into these slides and we'll skip over these slides nice and quick because you've all probably seen these slides a million times in the past. So, you know, you don't want to hear too much about the same stuff that you've heard over and over again. So here with the agenda, yeah, we'll have just a quick overview of the remote support, setting up and configuring that remote support. We're going to take a tour of those remote support apps there, and then some real world examples of how we can really increase that efficiency of getting calls logged, diagnosed, fixed, and closed off. And then we'll have some Q&A there at the end as well. So again, these are the slides that you guys have already seen multiple times, but basically a little bit about Cireson in the background. We were founded in 2012. Got over 1,200 customers worldwide. We're in 65 different countries and growing. The statistic that I'm always really proud of is that renewal rate. Having loyal customers and getting value for money out of the products is absolutely what we continue to strive for. So really proud of that 95% renewal rate for our customers with our products. Over the years, originally we started as a service manager only focused company. And then over the years here, we've introduced tools for configuration manager, whether that's the config manager portal, which then became control center, which is now the remote management that we're talking about here today as well. And by providing both of those tools, we're starting to be able to control the entire ecosystem of System Center, all from a nice user-friendly interface of the web browser to be able to get that information where we need it, when we need it. So when we start talking about the remote support apps, they really break down into two areas. One of them is device management. The other one is user management. So here under device management, this is where we can actually manage our workstations or servers, any config manager clients that we have out there. We really get those device insights as to what's happening with that device, with that client, what's installed, what's actually happening with it on a day-to-day basis. We can also control the services. So instead of having to remote into a user's machine to be able to start and stop a service or restart a service, we can all do that remotely without needing remote control into the machine. We don't even need the customer on the line to be able to do that work. So if we know that we can resolve that problem purely by the restart or a start of a particular service, we can do that remotely from here as well. Of course, we can do those remote actions, so we can actually remote control with the machine triggered from our machine and trigger it directly from within inside service management or the remote tools. So you don't have to have multiple apps running to be able to control what's going on. The patch control also gives us an insight as to what machines are patched and at what level, and what patches are remaining for that machine. And we can invoke those installations to occur. So much easier way of being able to gain control around what patches are deployed to our clients and how do we get them trued up to up to the latest version of those patches as quickly as possible, and always pick up those sort of last 5 or 10% of stragglers that are waiting to get those patches happening. Just like with service control, we can actually, using process insights, see what applications are actually currently running and using CPU right now, and we can kill those processes as well. So instead of having to remote into a machine, bring up Task Manager, find the particular item, and then end that task or end that process, we can actually do that completely remotely without needing to bug the customer. They don't even have to be on the line. We can do that completely remote, which is, again, really powerful when we know what the solution is in a very short period of time, or we can diagnose those problems directly as well. Now, using the collection control, we can quite easily add and remove clients and users into collections, add and remove them into collections inside Configuration Manager without needing the Configuration Manager client installed on the machine. Now, this gives us a lot of power because, first of all, we don't have to maintain that client console on the machine. We don't have to train staff in how to use the Configuration Manager console if they don't use it on a regular basis. We don't have to give them access to all of those extra components inside Configuration Manager that we don't want them to have access to. But we can give them access just to be able to add machines or users to collections for them to be able to get access to items as well, software or access to things. Now, a lot of you are probably saying, yeah, but we don't use collections like that. We use AD groups for that information there as well. And we'll come to that when we come to the user side of things as well. So software control. Again, software control is like going into the add remove programs inside the settings of a client machine and actually seeing what's installed on that client's computer and being able to do a repair or an uninstall of that application. Again, you can do that completely remotely without having to remote into the machine and without even the user being there. So we'll have a look at how we can do that there as well. Now, user device affinity is a piece that was added with Configuration Manager 2012 to allow administrators to be able to deploy applications to users and target them at users and not have that application then install on every machine that user then logs onto. So we can actually define that an application is only allowed to install on a user's primary device, and then we create this affinity between a user and a machine. That can have multiple machines as well, so it can have multiple primary machines. And most customers, most people with Configuration Manager installed turn on the automatic user device affinity and have certain rules running that if a certain user has used a machine for a certain number of hours for a certain number of days in a row, they then have affinity over that machine. Now, the problem with that is the fact that there is that delay between the user starting to use that machine and when they actually have affinity with that machine. You can manually assign that user affinity, but of course, historically, you had to go into Configuration Manager, know where to find it, find the particular computer, click on it, find the user, and so forth. It was an extra step that when you're on a service desk and the phone's ringing hot, you've got things to do, you want to be able to march on, you don't have time to be looking into those pieces as well. We bring that user affinity right into the tools that you've got right in front of you. So when someone calls up saying, oh no, I've just moved machines, or no, this isn't my machine anymore, this is now my new machine, with a quick couple of clicks, you're able to adjust that affinity very, very quickly. So a user can move from one machine to another, and within a couple of clicks, lose the affinity for their old one and move their affinity over to that new one. And then any applications that are then assigned to that user will then remove from the old one, install on the new one, and away we go. So we can actually start to really use the power of user device affinity with inside Configuration Manager. Deployment Insights allows us to see what's been deployed to that machine and what status it's in at the moment. And software deployment, we can actually trigger software deployment to those machines at any stage as well. So it gives us a lot of power without having to use a bunch of other tools running on our machine or having them installed on those machines as well. And when we look over to the user apps here as well, we have the remote support apps for user management. Now, this is where we start to get into the user side of things. Now, again, we can do device affinity from a user's perspective instead of just from a computer perspective. So depending on whether we're working with a user or working with a computer as to the way that we attack it, but same thing that appears there as well. Now, here we have account control and group control as well. So account control inside AD is about that unlocking of accounts because they've been locked out in the domain, or resetting their password. Really, really powerful to be able to do that directly from your support tool rather than having to have AD users and computers or the remote remote server administration toolkit installed on every single machine that your administration staff need, your analyst staffs need access to. You can do that directly from here. Same with group control. No need to go into AD users and computers, and for every analyst to have access to the AD users and computers and the rights to be able to add and remove people from groups. You can do that all from within inside the remote support tools, all under a service account, and all of those changes and actions being taken, being logged. So from an audit perspective and a historical perspective, seeing who did what to what account is very, very powerful there as well. And this is where you can start to add users and computers to AD groups. So if you do have collections associated to AD groups, you don't have to change your way of thinking or the way you actually deliver that as well. You can actually continue to use that process going forward. We also have user insights, which is basically all their information that they've got on AD, their phone numbers, their email addresses, when's their password due to expire, when's the last time they changed their password, so forth and so on, even down to their user device affinity and so forth. We have introduced recently here as well announcements. So announcements is a way of being able to create those announcements and pop up on a client's computer and actually have a ticker march along the bottom of the screen there as well. So from within inside Service Manager, we can quite easily invoke those announcements to appear on one or many computers in an environment, either targeted at users or computers. And again, we can deploy software directly to users. Now, again, historically, people haven't used deployment of applications to users because of the issue of user device affinity never being up to date. But with having those tools directly in here to make that change of the user device affinity much easier, you can now start to look at software deployment to users and control your licensing much easier that way. So let's swing over to a demo and have a look at what's going on here. If I jump into, nope, I have a server here. So I apologize. Let me jump into my servers over here. So here's my service management server. I'm running my Service Manager portal here. I log on. And here I've got a ticket that I'm actually here working at the moment. And what you may have noticed in the past is that we've now introduced these new icons here at the top of the Service Manager portal for attachments, which is really powerful, the click and drag and drop that appears there, but also the remote control looking piece here as well. So I can see any users that are assigned or related to this particular incident. And I can see here that Andrea is related here as an affected user. And I can see Andrea's email address here And I can see here that the assigned user, the actual analyst that this has been assigned to, their information appears here as well. And by clicking on a particular name, I can actually pull up those tools, those remote support tools. And I can see at a glance a bunch of different information. This is all those insights that we're seeing about a particular user, what their username is, what their email address is, domain, last change that's been made on there, their last logon, what primary devices they have. We're talking about the user device affinity there as well. When does their password expire and so forth, who their manager is, but also whether or not their user account is actually locked or unlocked on the domain. So maybe they've locked it due to a password issue, those sorts of things as well. So I can see at a glance whether or not it's actually locked on the domain. Now, if it is locked on the domain, let's jump into the other user here. This is the user that's actually called up. They're affected. I can't do this particular work. I can't do something. Oh, I can actually see that this is locked on the domain. So this is doing a call out to a domain controller and saying, hey, how's this user look? And it's coming back saying, oh no, they're locked. They've ruined their password. They've done something wrong there. Now I have a choice without having to go into 80 users and computers and look this up. That's already given me that information at a click exactly when I needed it, when the user's actually on the phone, inside the tools that I actually needed inside of. Now I can click unlock, and this will actually unlock this on Active Directory. Now that does a push back out to Active Directory, and I can see now that's unlocked, so the user can have another go at logging on. Now, they may not know their password. So by clicking on account control here, I can actually come in here and reset this user's password. Give it a username, give it a password, the password here, and confirm that password. And then I can force it to that the user has to change their password at next logon. So hit save. Are you sure we want to reset this user's password? Yes, I do. And an error occurred. So I can actually have a look at my logs here and actually see what that error is as part of that password reset. And I can actually see what's actually happened. The password does not meet the password policy requirements. So again, it's actually maintaining those password requirements that you already have set on your Active Directory. So we don't have to worry about those sides of things. So here instead, if I put in a more complex password, user must change, go, happy. That's now been reset. Now, because that's been reset, if I come back into user insights here and do a refresh on this particular user, last logged on there. Now that should say change password at next logon. But obviously it hasn't refreshed in that amount of time there as well. Anyway, so if I can go into logs here, I can see that that password was reset at a certain time. So this particular user reset the password for this particular user at this date and time, and it was successfully changed. So we know who has changed that password. Now, that's not possible easily under 80 users and computers. Some extra stuff that your security team will absolutely love. And depending on what organization you work for, this may be critical information that you need there as well. Okay, so it's not just user information that's a part of that there as well. So we can do additional things under those users, such as here's the user device affinity that we talked about. I've talked so much about. I can see all of my computers inside my organization, and I can assign one of those computers to that user. He says, there we go. That's now been assigned to that particular machine. I can remove that from this user or manage that for this user very, very simply. Deployment insights, I can actually see what's been deployed to this user, nothing to this user, and I can see what groups they belong to inside AD. Now I might want to give them access to things like, this is now part of the project team, I'm going to add that to them there, or this user may be a part of a particular application that I can add to. And this is all the groups inside Active Directory. Again, everything's been logged here, so I can actually see that add a primary device has been done here and add users to group as well, so I can see who did what and when. So great for auditing for security purposes. All right. Now from a customer, a client perspective or a PC perspective, I've added this configuration item. The particular configuration item is a computer that I've added in here. Now again, under remote, I can actually see this has been added as a device, and I can see the relationship is the affected device. By clicking on that device, I can actually get some insight into what's going on with that particular machine. And it's saying it's unavailable. Let me make sure this machine is actually up and running. It's plugged into the network. Yep, okay. Just remote into it one more time. See what it's saying. Nope, it's saying it's unavailable at the moment. Oh well. And therefore, because it's unavailable, the remote actions are going to be disabled here on this screen. But device insights, we can actually see this information from Active Directory, what information that I've got, and all of this is being pulled either from Active Directory or Configuration Manager. So I can very simply and easily look at the operating system, computer name, disk space, those sorts of things. So if someone's calling up saying, you know what, Photoshop's running really slow on my machine, what's going on? Simple look at the device here, I can see that this space is fine, but they've only got 1 gig of memory. Okay, that's going to be a problem for us. Those sorts of things. I can look at the client install for Configuration Manager. When was it last scanned? What was the software scan? Those pieces of information, what printers have been installed on this machine, what's its network configuration, MAC address, so forth as well. So I can go into that deep level to diagnose problems very quickly and easily, all from within inside my support tool. Now here on these remote actions, I can deploy server information or decommission a particular server. I can clear Pixie settings if you've got specific Pixie task sequence that have been set up. You can clear that very simply from here. You don't have to go into the Configuration Manager console to be able to do that information. You can trigger a remote desktop or remote control. You can open up their log folder or their admin C share. We can look at group policy for this particular machine or run a PowerShell command. We can repair the config manager client and also reset its policy. Now, config manager client can quite often fail for whatever reason, so we can always uninstall it. The other major reason that the configuration manager client may fail is that the WMI repository fails or gets hung up in some way. So we can actually verify that WMI, or we can repair it, or just reset it as well. So I can do this all remotely. None of these actually pop up on the client's machine in any way, shape, or form, except for remote control here. From a config manager perspective, I can actually trigger a heartbeat or inventory cycles or policy evaluation here as well. So the policy evaluation or the inventory cycles, you'd normally have to go into the remote system on the machine, remote in, do that information, actually get into the machine and actually trigger that action from the config manager client under control panel. So instead I can do it all directly from here, resolve that call off and close the call directly. Now, we talked about collection control here as well. I can actually add and remove machines from all my collections with inside Configuration Manager. All I need to do is search for it, and I've got all of my collections from within inside Configuration Manager here as well. Now, again, if you're only using AD groups for that, these will appear here, but you wouldn't add those in manually. Now, I can see here under software control what config manager data has actually been returned. So this hasn't had a report done on this machine yet. So what I'm going to do is just refresh this and see if that's now come up as a client. And let's see if it actually lets me do it this time around. No, it doesn't seem to want to for me. So normally, I apologize for that. There's always the gremlin in the works when you do a demo. Software control here under client data, what I would actually see is their add remove programs list that I would then be able to click and fix a machine. What we might try and do is see if there's another machine that is working for whatever reason. I'll start these bad boys up. We'll see if we can get back into that one at a later date. So I can actually remote those machines and look into the information that's there about what is currently installed on the machine, and then I can either add, remove, or repair those machines, those applications directly from here. Same with patch control, so I can see what config manager actually says it has installed on the machine, and from the client data, again, if it was up, would show me if it's got any pending patches that are here, and I can invoke those patches to install, and that will invoke the config manager client to actually do a reevaluation of that Windows update and grab all of the patches that it has mandated that needs to be installed. Same with process insights here. This is what's actually running on the machine. So if the client is actually up and connected to the network, we'll have all of the task manager applications that are running here, and I can stop or end that task here if I need to as well. Same with service control, list of all my services. Now here we can see that user device affinity, having multiple people that are associated to this. I can remove certain people if I need to, or add a particular user, or I can even manage a particular user directly from here as well. And again, what's been installed and what the status is with inside Configuration Manager of applications that have been deployed to this workstation. So as you can see, multiple years that have been successful, but you can see with the Outlook console app here, I've got a bunch of requirements that were not met as part of it. So maybe there was a .NET that didn't get installed or something like that. Again, same here for Asset Excel. There was a requirement that wasn't met, and then an install that happened that failed, and then the final install actually succeeded there as well. So great way of being able to break down what's actually happening in the background if someone's not receiving a particular patch or a particular piece of information there as well. So really powerful tools that can happen directly from in here. Now, you may have members of, say, the config manager team or a server team and so forth that don't live and breathe their time here inside the Service Manager portal with particular things. They want to be able to do extra work in the background. So you can actually use the remote support site. This is a completely independent site here and a replacement for Control Center. It has all the computers from within inside Configuration Manager. And again, I can see remote desktop or PowerShell, or I've got my different activities that I can do directly from here. For some reason, DNS doesn't seem to be working, which is why I'm having those problems trying to find those machines in here. So you can see normally, again, these items would be available if DNS was working and actually picking up that machine was actually online. So I can invoke PowerShell and so forth directly from here. Again, the machine has to be on, but I can just type that PowerShell command directly into here. And if it was up and running, it'd hit run. This would do a remote run of this code on this server and actually return all of my results in here. So again, I don't have to remote in. I don't have to take over the user's session. All of that information is logged as to who ran what code on what machine. Now, in the not too distant future, we'll actually be bringing in custom actions that you'll be able to add here, which at the end of the day is basically PowerShell type commands that you'll have if you've got some PowerShell scripts that you use on a regular basis to do certain diagnostics for clients, or maybe a custom application that you have. You'll be able to save that script as a remote action and actually trigger that remote action from here and actually give it access for particular users in there as well. Now, again, you can turn each one of these off depending on the user that's currently logged on, and have that granular control about what it is that you're doing. And just like with inside Service Manager, anyone using the remote support tools from here will be able to see all the users, all the computers, and all of those functions that they get as part of it as well. And just here at a glance, I can see that all of these machines are unlocked on the domain, and I can reset their password directly from here if I needed to. Exactly the same sorts of features that I can get that I would have inside Service Manager. So really powerful tools to be able to help you, as I said, diagnose the problems that we're having, but then also to resolve those problems and close the tickets off very quickly. So with inside one call here, someone calls up, I can log all of their information, click on the particular user, resolve that particular problem, have that problem resolved, or diagnose the problem in here, resolve the problem because I've actually induced it, or to get a particular piece of software or reboot and so forth, come back into the call and close it off very rapidly. So really, really useful tools where you need them, when you need them, all with inside a web browser. So very powerful way of being able to do that, and really accelerates the way you can deliver on your service management. So that's it for the demo as far as what the products can do. Now, there is one announcement that we've just made in the last week, and I guess this is the real impetus of this demo, and that is that we're now no longer forced to just use Service Manager as a product. The remote support tools now integrates with other products out there as well. So we've just announced that we're in the ServiceNow catalog as of last week. And we are working with other companies to be able to move these remote support tools into their tools there as well. So these tools will be available across a multitude of platforms, and it doesn't have to be with System Center Service Manager. Now, of course, we love Service Manager, and our portal is inside Service Manager, and we still are fully committed to Service Manager as a product for IT service management. But for whatever reason, if your organization does need to step away from Service Manager for whatever reason, these tools are still available for you to be able to use in a multitude of different areas. So really exciting times for us here that we'll actually be able to take the IT Monkey story to a wider audience out there as well. And the tools that you've come to know and love will be able to come with you if you move organizations, or your organization decides to take a different journey. So that's about it for today's webinar. Nice and short and sharp and shiny. If you don't have remote support already, go to softwaredownloads.cireson.com and install the remote support. The instructions and documentation for it all appears there on our docs site, so they're very easy to be able to run through and get that up and running. If you do require assistance with it, or have some additional questions, or would like assistance working through it, please reach out and contact either myself or Andrew Bennett, the Territory Manager for Asia Pacific, and we will be able to organise that for you to be able to give you that assistance. Now, if you're not yet a customer and you would like to trial these tools in your environment, please feel free to reach out to us at team@cireson.com and we can organise a demo and a free trial for you in your environment. And that's about it for today's presentation. If you've got any questions, please type them into the questions panel of the GoToWebinar application and we can answer those questions for you. If you don't have any questions, again, thank you very much for your time today. And we really appreciate you jumping on the call with us. And yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions that you have to myself or Andrew Bennett or the team here at Cireson. We're always happy to be able to assist you in any way we can. So we'll wait a few minutes for it to see if any questions come through. If anyone does have any questions, please type them in. I'm happy to answer them for you. If not, if you do think of a question later on, always feel free to drop me an email. I don't seem to have any questions coming in, so yeah, I guess we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time again, and we'll look forward to speaking to you at the next webinar. Thank you.